In this video, we will look at the various aspects of life cycle assessment as an environmental management tool. Green design and pollution prevention are proactive strategies to minimize the environmental burdens associated with a product or process without compromising functionality. Life cycle assessment is an objective process used to quantitatively evaluate the environmental burdens associated with a product, process, or activity throughout its entire life cycle. Through the cradle, through all the gates, and to the grave. It utilizes various mass and energy balance protocols as well as environmental impact evaluation techniques. For example, in the extraction of natural resources, LCA includes the impacts associated with the extracted materials as well as the impact associated with the extraction process. In other words, we can say that it is a scientific way to look at going green. Now, depending upon the objective for which an LCA is performed, the scope may range from cradle to grave, where the raw materials extraction to disposal of finished goods is taken into account. It could be cradle to gate, where the raw materials extraction to finished goods is considered, and it could be gate to gate, that is one processing stage to another. Now let us look at the product life cycle. Life cycle analysis is an approach that covers the whole life cycle of a product or service, usually from cradle to grave. That is, from raw material extraction to manufacturing, packaging, distribution, use, and end of life. Here, process steps are identified for each stage in the life cycle. The inputs, which includes energy resources as well as materials, and outputs, which includes the products, emissions, and pollutants, are determined for each step. Thus, emphasis is given to both energy and resource consumption as well as environmental discharges. The inputs and outputs are then grouped into impact categories, which are categories of environmental problems, and finally, by examining a product or service over its entire life cycle, proper decisions can be arrived at. The procedures of life cycle assessment are part of the ISO 14000 Environmental Management Standards developed by the International Organization for Standardization. Take a look at the life cycle assessment framework. An LCA contains three phases: goal and scope definition, inventory analysis, and impact assessment, and each phase is followed by interpretation. The goal specifies the reasons for carrying out the LCA. The goal is important because the parameters to be used in the assessment are usually dependent on what the intended objectives are. The scope helps to establish the system boundaries and the limits of the LCA. For example, if an LCA is to be performed to compare products, it is usually not the products themselves that are the basis of the comparison, but the functions they provide. So a useful term called a functional unit is defined in the scope. In inventory analysis, it involves determining the quantitative values of the materials and the energy inputs and outputs of all process stages within the life cycle. This includes raw materials as well as energy needs, manufacturing processes, transportation, storage and distribution requirements, use and reuse, recycle and end of life scenarios such as incineration and landfilling. Impact assessment entails determining the environmental relevance of all the inputs and outputs of each stage in the life cycle. This includes the environmental impacts associated with the production, use, and disposal of the products. Relevant impact categories are selected, such as degradation of the ecological systems, depletion of natural resources, and impacts on human health and welfare. For example, if we conducted the LCA of paper-based textbooks, examples of ecological systems degradation can include the impact of cutting trees as well as the impact of chemicals discharged during pulping on water quality. Trees as natural resources are renewable but not replaceable rapidly enough to immediately offset the impact of logging. The impact of the chemicals used on the health of the populations directly connected to the paper processing industries will also be assessed. Interpretation. LCA results present the opportunities to reduce or mitigate identified environmental impacts arising from the manufacture, use, and disposal of products. Thus, LCA represents the most objective tool currently available to inform decisions on the environmental sustainability of products and processes. Now let us look at the key steps of a life cycle impact assessment. The first step is selection and definition of impact categories. For example, identifying relevant environmental impact categories such as global warming, acidification, terrestrial toxicity, etc. Classification involves assigning LCI results to the impact categories. For example, classifying carbon dioxide emissions to global warming. Characterization is quantitatively determining the impacts arising from the environmental stresses determined in the inventory stage. For example, modeling LCI impacts within impact categories using science-based conversion factors. Modeling the potential impact of carbon dioxide and methane on global warming is an example. Some LCAs include a normalization step. This step involves dividing the impact values obtained from characterization by reference values in order to determine the relative magnitude and significance of the impacts caused by the system under study. Grouping refers to sorting the impact results from characterization into different defined groups for analysis and presentation. For example, impacts can be sorted under global, regional or local scale concerns or high, medium and low priority impacts. Weighting gives emphasis on the most potential impacts. Relative importance of one impact is weighted against other impacts. And the last one is evaluating and reporting LCA results, which gives a better understanding of the reliability of the LCA results. Let's look at the impact categories. The global impacts include global warming, ozone depletion, etc. Regional impacts include photochemical smoke, acidification, etc. And the local impacts include human health, terrestrial toxicity, aquatic toxicity, land use, etc.